It was a daring raid. Tens of millions of dollars stolen from Bangladesh's central bank via the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and then laundered in the Philippines. The money and the thieves then vanished. I'm Steve Chow. On this episode of 101 East, we investigate one of the biggest bank robberies of modern times and ask how the cyber hackers got away with it.
Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh. A teeming, chaotic city and one of the world's poorest. 17 million people live here, a third of them surviving on less than $2 a day. Bangladesh has one of the world's fastest growing economies. It's a country on the up, but one that could ill afford to lose more than $80 million of taxpayers' money. Bangladesh Bank, the country's central bank, is at the heart of its economic system. It overlooks a busy roundabout in Dhaka's financial district. High walls and tight security to stop anyone getting in who shouldn't be there. But sometimes physical barriers aren't enough.
For this heist, nobody broke in and nobody took anything away. The entire crime was perpetrated electronically.
On the evening of Thursday, February the 4th, 2016, the start of the weekend in Muslim Bangladesh, most of the central bank staff had gone home. The building was secure, but intruders were already inside. In an interim report, experts commissioned by Bangladesh Bank said a malicious program was installed on the bank's computer systems. The malware, possibly delivered via an infected email, collected passwords and usernames, and covered its own tracks. Investigators say they found considerable evidence that the hackers used the bank's credentials to access SWIFT, the international messaging system used to send money around the world. The hackers then generated 35 requests to transfer funds from Bangladesh Bank's account with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The orders came close to $1 billion. Most of the requests were blocked, but 4 did get through, and as a result, almost $81 million was sent to accounts at a bank called RCBC, thousands of miles away in the Philippines.
I couldn't believe it, I tell you, because nothing like that, even a smaller thing like that never happened. So I was dumb, and actually for a while.
Atiur Rahman was the governor of the bank when its systems were compromised and the money was stolen.
You know, I'm not blaming SWIFT, I'm not blaming Fed, I'm not blaming Bangladesh Bank, but the entire system was not strong enough to really withstand the kind of attack that it got.
All institutions touched by the heist have denied they were at fault for the losses. They have, however, taken steps to improve security. Police headquarters in downtown Dhaka. Detectives here are working with authorities in other countries in what has become an international investigation. They've yet to confirm how the hackers got into the system.
We process all the data, and FBI is helping us, Interpol is helping us, and we are trying to find out the conclusive evidence we get maybe soon.
Investigators are sifting through 10 terabytes of data in the hunt for a smoking gun that might identify the culprits. Though no bank insiders have been charged over the heist, police say they must fully investigate the possibility.
We are looking into that.
Maybe a bank employee?
Yes, maybe.
Bangladesh Bank denies that anyone on the inside was involved and also denies negligence. The police have not charged anyone from Bangladesh Bank in relation to the heist. To find out more, I contacted one of the private sector cybersecurity companies that have investigated the methods used by the hackers.
What were your thoughts when you heard that this central bank had been hacked?
Yeah, the early indicators show that they likely got in through some sort of spear phishing message. So basically, they sent an email to someone, and then that person basically clicked on that email and had their computer system infected. Now, they were going after what's called the SWIFT terminals. These are the terminals or computers that are responsible for conducting large bank transfers between organizations or even countries. It's basically they're modifying the applications on the computer that has sort of been hijacked. And remember, those computers are actually inside the bank. This is a case where this institution was compromised more so than anything SWIFT specific.
In Bangladesh, the investigation into who stole the $81 million continues. But it's quite possible that the hackers may actually have never set foot in the country. The missing millions were sent overseas, and I'm following the money trail to the Philippines, where electronic wire transfers became hard cash. I've come to Manila. It's one of the fastest growing cities in Asia. Manila's business district has expanded substantially over the last decade, but its banking sector operates under unusually strict secrecy laws. And that includes the institution which helped turn the transfers from Bangladesh into cash.
It was by sending money here that the thieves effectively made their getaway. $81 million of Bangladesh Bank's funds ended up in this local branch of a bank called RCBC.
And they did it using bank accounts that had been opened months earlier using fake IDs and had since lain inactive. The hackers had sent payment requests from Bangladesh Bank to the New York Fed on Thursday, and by Friday, the money had hit accounts at RCBC in Manila. It was then moved between an array of other accounts controlled by a remittance company called Philrem, and some of it was converted into Philippine pesos. Over a period of 10 days, the money was transferred electronically and in cash and channeled into Manila's casino industry.
The accounts here on Jupiter Street were a vital clue for investigators. They were crucial for laundering the money, and someone had set them up using false names and fake credentials. The question is, who?
The Philippine Senate held an inquiry into the laundering of the proceeds of the heist. It heard that the accounts were opened by the manager of the RCBC Jupiter Street branch, a woman called Maya Digito.
You tell the truth here.
Your Honor, I will tell the truth.
She says she opened the accounts for this man, a Manila casino owner and agent she'd known for several years, called Kim Wong, who also gave evidence at the inquiry. Maya Digito declined to be interviewed for this program, but she testified to the inquiry that she had actually met 4 people whose names were on the accounts. She's been represented by a lawyer who has an unusual taste in art.
Mr. Wong vouched for their identities, presented documents which showed their identities, and requested her to open accounts in her branch on behalf of these 5 individuals. And with the promise that a substantial amount would come into these accounts.
Wong hasn't been formally charged over the heist, but is subject to civil action. He denied Digito's version of events and denied knowing that the money was stolen.
Wala akong kinalaman sa pagpeke ng bank documents para pumasok ng pera sa bansa. Hindi ko alam ang pinagmulan ng $81 million. Si Maya ang nagpeke lang sinasabing 5 bank accounts. Isang foreigner lang po ang ninifer ko kay Maya. Meron po akong pangalan at litrato po.
RCBC Bank was fined close to $20 million for failing to comply with banking regulations, and its chief executive and president resigned. The bank said it accepted the findings of the regulator and wants to move on. The company's lawyer says Maya DeGito was a rogue employee. The branch manager says that she was naive, that she was a pawn in a much larger plan, which she didn't clearly understand at the time.
I disagree with that. She knows the banking system. She's trained of all the policies of the bank. She knew about these accounts. She set it up. She was obviously waiting for the funds to be credited. And when it was credited, she acted with lightning speed in getting these accounts out of the beneficiary accounts into other accounts.
The Senate report documented the timing of the payments. Many were made within minutes of each other. Maya DeGito's lawyers say that when funds were received on February the 5th, she confirmed the legitimacy of the remittances with RCBC head office and received emails confirming they were from valid sources. Her legal team say she didn't have authority to unilaterally prevent transfers, and their client was told there was no reason to hold the funds. Following an investigation by anti-money laundering authorities, the AMLC, the Philippine Department of Justice, has recommended that Maya DeGito be charged with 8 counts of money laundering. Her legal team is trying to quash the charges against her, but if the case goes ahead, she will plead not guilty. Sergio Osmeña, a former Philippine senator who sat on the committee looking into the heist, says he doesn't believe 7 days of testimony uncovered the whole story.
We couldn't quite get her to explain everything because we did not give her witness protection program.
When the money left RCBC, it was paid to accounts at the Philrem Remittance Company. Philrem was run by Michael and Salud Bautista. They, along with Kim Wong and the company that owns a casino called Solaire, are the subject of pending legal action by money laundering authorities to try to recover some of the stolen money. Kim Wong and Solaire say they are complying with the authorities. The Bautistas have not responded to our request for comment. One stumbling block for the Senate inquiry was the unusually high level of privacy afforded to bank accounts. The Philippines, along with Switzerland and Lebanon, has one of the most secretive banking sectors in the world.
Kim Wong's bank account, we couldn't get it. Philrem's bank account, we couldn't get it. Why? Bank Secrecy Act. It stopped us from getting the whole picture. It stopped us from tracing the money because we couldn't get the bank accounts of anybody.
Almost $15 million has been recovered, according to the official Philippine Senate report, some of it handed over by Kim Wong, who denied knowing it was stolen. The AMLC says Philrem still holds $17 million of the stolen money and is suing for its return. The company denies it has the money. Almost $50 million has been traced to casinos and gambling junket operators, according to the AMLC investigation. But none of that $67 million has been recovered. The casinos were used for turning the electronic money transfers into hard cash, though there's been no inference they knew the funds were stolen. They weren't covered by money laundering laws at the time and weren't required to record large transactions. For Sergio Osmeña's committee, the heist exposed serious flaws, and they were flaws that were predictable.
I was concerned, especially in 2010 when they were going to develop the 4 big casinos here. When they did that, I said, it's time that we updated our money laundering law because this is going to be very bad for us.
The Senate inquiry made more than a dozen recommendations, which included extending money laundering laws to casinos and making it easier to access information about bank accounts. New laws covering the casinos were passed in July 2017, and earlier that year, the Philippines appointed a new central bank governor who vowed to make it harder for dirty money to enter the financial system. But Osmeña says he found it hard to get politicians to act.
We have the strictest bank secrecy law in the world, and I can't get any of my congressmen and senators to amend that law.
York City, one of the world's biggest financial centers and home to one of its most important financial institutions. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York, or the Fed. Its Manhattan headquarters sit on top of 508,000 gold bars, and it handles around $800 billion of payments every day. Jonathan Spicer reports on its activity, which moves markets around the world.
Well, no one thinks as the Federal Reserve in terms of cyber heists. Usually, you think of economics, you think of labor markets, you think of macro models that the U.S. central bank and its economists are poring over to try to decide what to do about interest rates. It turns out, of course, that there's about $3.5 trillion of foreign funds being held at the New York Fed, and the Fed is basically the account custodian for 250 foreign entities around the world.
And its customers included Bangladesh's central bank, and it was to the New York Fed that the hackers sent 35 messages requesting payments from the Bangladesh bank account.
Things could have been a lot worse, but for an extraordinary coincidence. Millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, were never transferred because the name Jupiter in the address for the bank happened to match that of an oil tanker, nothing to do with the heist, but on the list of US sanctions against Iran. As a result, most of the transfer orders were flagged as suspicious and blocked by the Fed.
And there were other reasons the transfer requests could have aroused suspicion. They were different to most payments made by Bangladesh Bank. They weren't formatted properly, and these were large payments to individuals rather than organizations. But largely because the requests appeared to be authenticated by SWIFT, $81 million was sent.
When I use my card in a foreign country, for example, or for a sudden large purchase, it can trigger a simple fraud inquiry from my bank. Real-time monitoring. The technology is quite straightforward. But in the case of the heist, nothing like that happened at the Fed.
The vast majority of these payment requests that arrive on the doorstep of the New York Fed are automatically executed. They come to the SWIFT network. They have all the boxes ticked. They're SWIFT authenticated, and so they automatically go out the door.
But Fed staff were concerned enough about some of the payments to try to contact Bangladesh Bank. At the end of Thursday, they sent a message using SWIFT, and 2 more on Friday. But hackers had compromised Bangladesh Bank's SWIFT system and sabotaged a crucial printer in the Dhaka office. It wasn't until Saturday that Bangladesh Bank staff realized what had happened and tried to contact the Fed urgently, but could only use numbers they found on the internet, lines that weren't answered at the weekend. On Monday, Bangladesh Bank finally got messages through to New York saying they'd been hacked. They would have been seen as staff arrived for work in New York at 7:30 in the morning. The Fed declined our invitation to provide someone for interview, but said this: while the event in February 2016 did not result in a breach or compromise of the New York Fed's systems, we did view this as an opportunity to further strengthen the safety of global payments. The New York Fed performs certain screening of and diligence on funds transfers sent both to and from the accounts of foreign central banks on our books. The robustness of cybersecurity around the global payment system must continue to be a priority for each participant in the chain. Brussels, Belgian capital and home to European institutions, as well as the headquarters of SWIFT, a cooperative organization owned by the banks that use it.
Well, in 1973, you have to go back to then, banks were sending messages to each other using the telex. Imagine getting 10,000 faxes a day. Not very secure, not very automated. So 239 banks from 15 countries said, hey, let's use computers, 1973. Let's use global telecommunications and try to get it to work. And they formed the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, SWIFT. And today, fast forward, it's thousands of banks, hundreds of 200 countries, and trillions of dollars a day flow through the SWIFT network over 10 trillion a day now.
And it was SWIFT's messaging system that the hackers accessed to send messages to the Fed.
We always realized that SWIFT's weak spot were at the user's terminal, at the endpoints, because we're not responsible for the physical security and for them keeping their own passwords safe and secure and other credentials. And over time, you can imagine as cybercrime became much more sophisticated, SWIFT should have been doing more, or could have been doing more, as we all know today.
SWIFT declined to be interviewed, but said there is no indication that SWIFT's network or core messaging services have been compromised in the recent attacks on banks. While our customers are individually responsible for the security of their own environments, we fully recognize that the security of the industry as a whole is a shared responsibility. In mid-2016, we launched a customer security program to reinforce the local security of their SWIFT-related infrastructure. And the organization has introduced changes. Users like Bangladesh Bank now require more than just a username and a password to log in. Under pressure over the heist, changes have been made at some of the big institutions. But will they be enough to stay ahead of the hackers? And who was behind this audacious theft? What happened to much of the money that was played at casino tables in the Philippines isn't known. But analysis by US authorities and cybersecurity experts says the digital fingerprint found at the scene of the crime, Bangladesh Bank's computer systems, points to North Korea. In the UK, the defense company BAE Systems is subject to frequent attacks by hackers and helps other organizations defend themselves from cybercrime. According to its experts, the Bangladesh Bank heist bears the hallmark of other attacks, a distinctive code used to erase the tracks of hackers that also featured in an attack on Sony Pictures in 2014. The US government has blamed that on North Korea, a claim that North Korea denies.
So we've got a few clues from the tools that these attackers used in Bangladesh Bank and other attacks that we've seen. And the tools are very specific to a group called Lazarus. And this is a name that's been given by the security community. And it's a group that has been involved in attacks on South Korea. They've been involved in attacks in the US. We've seen them in attacks in Europe as well. And they're almost certainly behind this Bangladesh Bank heist as well.
The Russian cybersecurity firm Kaspersky Lab has also said it found digital evidence that Lazarus hackers made a direct connection from an IP address in North Korea to a server in Europe used to control systems infected by the group. Kaspersky said that was the first time they've seen a direct connection between Lazarus and North Korea. And while it's possible the Bangladesh hackers were trying to frame Pyongyang, North Korean involvement was the most likely explanation. And in 2017, the then deputy director of the National Security Agency said private sector research linking North Korea to the heist was strong.
With that linkage from Sony actors to the Bangladeshi bank actors is accurate, that means a nation state is robbing banks. That's a big deal, in my view. That's different.
And do you believe that there are nation states now robbing banks? Is that your assessment?
I do.
Allegations of hacking, whether from security firms or officials in the United States and South Korea, are all denied by the North Korean government. But no matter who is behind the Bangladesh bank job, North Korea or an unknown crime syndicate, could there be another cyber heist? Well, there have already been more attempts.
In 2017, Taiwan's Far Eastern International Bank was attacked by hackers trying to steal millions of dollars using the SWIFT payment system. The banks declined to comment. Russia's central bank has said hackers took control of computers at an unnamed Russian bank in 2017 and used the SWIFT system to steal $6 million. And in February 2018, hackers tried to steal nearly $2 million from India's City Union Bank. The bank said there were similarities with the Bangladesh case. On the trail of the missing millions, I've visited many places, from the heart of the global financial system to developing countries, all with different levels of technological sophistication. But their banks all share one thing, the messaging system SWIFT. And hackers have realized its users can make themselves vulnerable.
Maybe Bangladesh is a victim, but it is at the cost of Bangladesh that the global payment system is improving.
But enforcing the highest standards internationally is a challenge.
Where I think the vulnerability is that there isn't a more global, coordinated response to these threats.
And the hackers have not gone away. The Bangladesh heist was a wake-up call for the international banking system. Changes have been made, but the threat from hackers is constantly evolving. And many institutions regard cybersecurity as the biggest risk they face today.